Welcome to Football Never Sleeps, the bi-week snubbing, highly caffeinated, aspiring to be viral YouTube show that not only focuses on Notre Dame football, it never strays from Notre Dame football. I'm Eric Hansen, he's Tyler James, and yes, I realize I'm about 9 days off on the Wear Green theme. Ahead, we've got 62 and a half minutes or so to break down the latest on the injury front for the 11th ranked Irish, both long-term losses and recoveries, and what's ahead on the schedule in October. We'll also look at Saturday's top 25 chaos while Notre Dame was home eating proverbial cheeseburgers and what that means for Notre Dame's playoff aspirations. We've got recruiting news for you too, including where the Irish go for a 2025 quarterback prospect. So start filling up the question queue. It's all ahead, straight ahead on I only stumbled 5 times in that intro.
Oh, I thought you did great, Eric. Give yourself a break.
And I'm still in my TV clothes.
Well, we'll allow it. You are TV ready, and that's what we like to see. Off the top, a new sponsor alert. Football Never Sleeps is now presented by MyBookie. Sunday is the one day of the week I get to think about football that has nothing to do with work. Eric does all the heavy lifting on the Notre Dame football front. And I love tuning into the NFL, cheering on my Chicago Bears, and trying to pick winners of other games across the league. Now I'm turning to MyBookie because it's the one book that has your back. There's no fluff, no second guessing, just straight up action with the decisions in your hands as you try to find an edge. Maybe you have your eyes on a money line, or there's a game total that you're sold will go under. MyBookie has what you need to make a good wager. And MyBookie has hooked us up with a deal for our Football Never Sleeps viewers. So check this out. If you're interested, sign up with promo code INDS to double your first deposit of up to $1,000 with a 100% deposit bonus. Click the link in our video description below, and remember to use code INDS to get this incredible deal. Bet anything, anytime, from anywhere with MyBookie, the sportsbook that gives you the control.
Well, I'll tell you what, if anybody got all those games right on Saturday, I want to party with you. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, no, you're good. Even if you did spend a bunch of money during Notre Dame's bye week, or maybe you lost some by taking the wrong side of one of those many upsets from Saturday that Eric mentioned, we have your back with a 30-day free trial to InsideNDSports.com. Use promo code NDYT when you sign up to get free access to our premium analysis and recruiting coverage, and special access to us over on the Insider Lounge, where we spend a lot of our time. Our community shares all their opinions, and we drop our inside information there first. Also, make sure you're subscribed to us here on YouTube, which is free. So just all it costs you is a click. That allows you to get the questions in during the show if you want to get answers from us, and make sure you don't miss any of the content that we're rolling out. Appreciate everyone who's chiming in tonight. Jeff Stevens, Brian Habermel, Scott Fegan. Shout out to you guys. We want to hear from you in the comments, even if you're watching on replay too. All right, now let's have a good show, Eric. The best and most obvious place to start is the injury front, because it felt like you needed a glossary for all the injuries this week. But let's start with the worst news first, and that's for sophomore Viper Boubacar Traore, who will be out for the rest of the season with a torn ACL. Notre Dame will now be down its top 2 Vipers from the start of the season, after Jordan Botelho was also lost for the season in the Purdue game. First, let's reflect on Traore and what he was doing for Notre Dame. What has impressed you the most, or had impressed you the most, about what he brought to Notre Dame's defense?
Well, I expected him to step up with pass rush this year. We saw little bursts of it last year when he was very much a part-time player, but we saw enough of it. And then we saw it in the spring and in the fall game. We're like, oh my gosh, it's just a matter of time with this guy. But what really had impressed me through the start of the season was he was pretty well-rounded. He was playing the run well too.
Yes.
And they're going to miss his burst in the pass rush, no matter who they put there now. But yeah, I think, when he comes back from this, whenever that happens to be, he's a star in the making once he can get his feet under him again. Now, again, This is a guy that's missed a lot of football. He missed almost his whole senior year with an injury. And I think in Massachusetts, they took the year off for COVID one of those years too, or at least had a very limited schedule. And yet he's made all this progress despite that. So I feel good about him being able to jump back in there eventually when he's healthy. So what are your thoughts on losing Boubacar for the season?
Yeah, that's a tough loss. I was very impressed with how he had continued to evolve as a more well-rounded player. I was very bullish on his ability to be a pass rusher, this season, but I wasn't necessarily sure how much he could be an every down player for Notre Dame this year. And he had become that. Certainly had room for improvement, but had really stepped up and helped it feel like not that significant of a loss that you didn't have Jordan Botelho, who was playing the best football of his career. Now without Botelho and Traore, I feel like that loss is going to be felt more significantly. We'll have to wait till next year to see how Boubacar Traore continue to ascend, and hopefully this isn't a setback that maybe turns the trajectory of his career, because I think he had quite the bright future with the way he was developing here as a sophomore.
Right. And the thing is, like, even next spring, there's no way Botelho, if Botelho decides to come back, or Traore will be around. So you won't have either of them back next spring. So it's really going to be the junior Tuihalamaka, Logan Thomas show. Now, Marcus talked about, and we actually talked about it on last week's show, how we thought this might go. And Marcus confirmed Josh Burnham would be in the mix there on both ends. What are your thoughts about Josh bouncing back and forth between those positions?
Yeah, he makes it for him as a player. I think it's fine. I think he can play both sides. The only thing that makes me nervous is that he's coming back from an ankle injury. And I think Notre Dame needs to be careful with him and not overworking him, because Notre Dame needs him not just for Saturday; they need him for the remainder of the season. And so you don't want his ankle injury to be something that's nagging and keeps limiting him. I mean, just look to Jordan Faison, who's someone who has struggled to stay fully healthy from his ankle injury from the season opener. Now, obviously, everyone's injury is different. Different positions come with different opportunities to get hurt. But I think Joshua Burnham is someone that has the ability to play both sides, and I think they're probably going to need him to play both sides, because I don't know that you want to have to fully rely on Logan Thomas as your number 2 Viper, or fully rely on Bryce Young as your number 2 field defensive end. So I think you want to be able to have the opportunity and ability to play Burnham on both sides. What do you think?
I think you make a lot of sense there, and I want to review for people that haven't been following Burnham as closely. He got hurt on the last series of the Northern Illinois loss, which was way back on September 7th. And then he played 4 plays in the Louisville game. So he had just a little cameo there. I think the real interesting question is, who potentially, let's say by the end of October, who's going to be the best Viper among junior Logan Thomas and Burnham? Who's the best field end among RJ Oben, Bryce Young, and Burnham? Did I put Bryce Young on both sides?
No, I think you had it right.
Okay. It's another sip of coffee. Among Bryce Young, RJ Oben, and Burnham. I mean, because Burnham was playing in that Northern Illinois game, he played over 50 snaps. He was kind of ascending to the top of that side of the depth chart. And I liked him. I mean, last year it felt like Burnham was ahead of Junior at the end of the year before they flipped him over to the other side. So I'm wondering if you think he might be the best player at both positions, or if that's going to get watered down by him bouncing back and forth.
I think there's a possibility that he is the best at both positions. I
think he's the best athlete now. I think Bryce Young is a monster, but I think
Right.
Burnham is refined at this point.
Yeah, Bryce Young right now is a monster for a freshman. He's not a monster for college football, and that limits him. And Logan Thomas isn't necessarily physically ready to be an every down college football player right now
At
as a defensive
6'4",
lineman.
224.
So I think that, and I think one thing that maybe it's too late to hope this, but maybe RJ Oben, something in the bye week clicked for him, and he turns a corner and becomes more of the version that Notre Dame thought he would be. I'm a bit skeptical after watching the start to the season, but there is a good player in there. We saw what he could do at Duke. He was an established player.
And he had a good last week of spring too, if you remember.
Yeah, so well, maybe he benefited from playing against Notre Dame's offensive tackles in the spring.
Stop it.
But so yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of questions ahead of what this defensive end rotation looks like, and certainly guys like Jalen Sneed, guys like Kingston Viliamuasa are going to get chances to rush off the edge in passing down situations that will take a little bit of the pressure off of the Viper. And so maybe Burnham's not in there as a Viper in those situations, but he's a field end in those situations, but you still get a good pass rush from someone like him. And then you can bring in one of those sort of pass rush specialists from the linebacker position. So I think it's going to be one of the more fascinating positions to watch down the stretch of this season. But certainly getting Joshua Burnham back and having him able to contribute on both sides, I think will help Notre Dame greatly. All right. There were 3 players deemed probable for Saturday's game today. Burnham being one of them with his ankle injury, cornerback Christian Gray, who missed the Louisville game with a shoulder injury, and wide receiver Jordan Faison, who left the Louisville game, with an ankle injury. How would you rank the importance of these 3 playing on Saturday?
I think Burnham is the clear number 1 there. And then I say that only because Leonard Moore did so good at cornerback. Now, this is assuming there's no other injuries. There's not a new injury introduced, like Ben Morrison doesn't have to run to the locker room. I would say Christian Gray would be number 2 and Jordan Faison is 3, because Jordan Faison has not played a lot of football this year. And I do have faith that Chris Mitchell and KK Smith could handle the position, and Notre Dame could possibly move Jaden Harrison out there, I guess, if they really needed to, or put him in motion and let him run outside. But I do feel like Burnham needs to play in this game, and establish himself at both of those positions coming back. I think they need his burst. How about you?
Yeah, we're in agreement there. I think Burnham is the guy. Notre Dame needs its defensive front to be at its best against an offense that's going to throw a lot at you. And typically in the game of football, the best way to neutralize that is with a impressive performance from your front 4. And so I think Notre Dame needs to rely on that on Saturday. Certainly you want to have Christian Gray back out there to help. But I think Burnham's the number 1 there, and I think Gray's 2, and then Faison's 3. I think Notre Dame's offense can get by. I think there is a better version of Notre Dame's offense with Faison playing
right
at full health, but I don't know that it's necessarily required to beat Stanford on Saturday. All right, there were also 3 players who have been ruled questionable for Saturday's game. Tight end Cooper Flanagan with an ankle injury, defensive tackle Gabriel Rubio with a foot injury, and offensive guard Billy Strouth with an ankle injury. Do you think any of these players are more likely to return for Saturday's game than the others?
I kind of, when I was doing the depth chart today, I kind of kept Flanagan and Strouth at the bottom of the depth chart. I think I wouldn't rush those two back. I wouldn't rush Rubio either, but I think he can make an impact. The thing is, he's been gone the longest. I mean, we're talking the first day of training camp. So I'm really curious where his game is. But Gabe Rubio at his best, I think, raises the level of what Notre Dame can do against the run. And he also gives them another body to a big body. I mean, a 6'5", 316-pound body. That's a lot bigger than Donovan Heinisch is in that nose guard position. I like all those players. I think Schrouth is Notre Dame's best guard. Rocco's done a decent job to this point. I don't know that Stanford is the threat to sack the quarterback that some of the other teams that Notre Dame plays later on will be. But if you said if I had a choice of who would come back first, I would, ask the, injury gods for Gabe Rubio to come back if I'm Marcus Freeman. How about you?
Yeah, I would think Flanagan would be the most likely to be able to return because he's played most recently. I didn't have any sense that Rubio and Schrouth were that close before the bye week. So I think it might be harder for those guys to hit the ground running, and especially like if Schrouth is going to play, he's going to play, right? He's not, and so you're going to want him to be fully ready to go when you play him,
because you're not going to rotate him. Rubio would be in a rotation,
right? And Rubio,
Flanagan too.
I wouldn't be surprised if Rubio's first game is something like Joshua Burnham's game not last week, but the last time out when he played basically just in goal line packages. And so it was a very light workload for Joshua Burnham to get Gabriel Rubio's back in the swing of things because he hasn't played a game this season. He was out the first practice of the preseason and missed the spring. So it's just a lot for him to come back from to be able to compete at a high level for a significant amount of plays. So I would imagine his return will be somewhat gradual. And I think you could probably get away with Flanagan not playing a ton too when you got two other tight ends that you're relying on. Maybe Flanagan's your third tight end and you only put him in a couple of situations to get a better sense of where that ankle is, because that's how things have been going at the tight end position. All right, a couple other notes on the injury front before we start knocking out some of these questions you guys have sent our way. Freeman also shared that freshman safety Bronte Johnson is still a few weeks away from being able to return, and freshman quarterback CJ Carr was dealing with elbow soreness from practice and has been rehabbing it. Do you think that is a reason for concern with CJ Carr?
No, I don't. Not at this point. I mean, somebody had asked me in the chat, and I passed on the question because I wasn't sure at the time what was going on, why CJ didn't warm up before the Louisville game, and now we know. But I mean, Notre Dame's not counting on him for this year. And I also think in terms of how Notre Dame is going to structure practice and even the bye week practices, you've got so much to play for right now all of a sudden again in terms of what's ahead of you in 2024 that, getting ready for 2025 really is back burner. And CJ Carr is a part of the 2025 equation. He's not really part of 2024 other than occasionally being a scout team quarterback and being really good. I mean, you want him to continue to evolve his game, but it didn't sound like Marcus was super concerned about it. So how about you? Are you concerned about it?
I mean, it's not something you love to hear, a quarterback with an elbow issue. Like I don't
remember we went through that with Jimmy Clausen. Way back when.
It's not great, but yeah, I don't. It's not to the point of major concern, but it's just something to certainly keep an eye on, and you hope that's something that is a one-time thing that isn't a recurring thing. That
so Deuce Knight's going to say, "I was just kidding, I'm coming.
My elbow feels great. I'm on the way." All right, well let's jump into some of the questions here. Irish fan says, "I only got partway through the Coach Freeman's press conference transcript, but I noticed what he said about Gerby Lambert playing more this year. What did you read into that comment?"
I don't remember him saying he was playing more this year. I think he said he's played well, and when he's going to be an excellent player when his time comes. So I don't remember him saying that. Tyler, do you?
No, I think we do some transcript sharing when it comes to Freeman's press conference, and I do think one of the versions that I saw had something that wasn't fully reflective of what Freeman said, and I don't remember what it was exactly. That is fixed in the transcript that's on our website. I'm trying to find that quote exactly in the transcript here. I have it pulled up. I just got to find it.
Well, while you're looking for it, why don't I give my thoughts on Gary Lambert? I think at some point he's going to be a starter. I don't think that's going to be this season, but I think Notre Dame needed to look at that during the bye week. I think they needed to evaluate the tackles and say, okay, is Emil Wagner in the right spot being a right tackle? Does Tosh Baker deserve another chance? And we kind of learned today that Tosh Baker is playing with some shoulder injuries that could have been corrected by surgery, and he decided to try to help his team this year. And then Gary Lambert's name came up as a talented guy, and I think you had to look at him too. But it certainly sounds from Marcus Freeman's standpoint that he's happy with the progress that Anthony Knapp is making at left tackle.
Yeah, here's the full quote from Marcus Freeman about Gerby Lambert. Gerby Lambert is continuously improving. He got here in the summer. He has a lot of talent. There's always a lot to learn as a freshman, but he's progressing. He's very smart, very athletic. He's going to be a great football player for this team when his time presents itself. So, yeah, nothing specific about Gerby Lambert being expected to play this year. All right. Scott Fegan asks, great week ahead. Do you see the passing offense making some strides this week against Stanford?
They should, for two reasons. One is Stanford has one of the worst pass efficiency defenses in the country. They're in the bottom 20. And they had a whole bye week to work on big picture kind of fundamentals. So I would, we saw Riley Leonard have his best game against Louisville, and Stanford's defense isn't as good as Louisville's in any facet, really. They've been tough against the run. I think that's going to get knocked down a little bit when they play Notre Dame on Saturday. But they've really struggled to stop people throwing the ball against them. So, yes, I do expect that to be the case.
Yeah, I think the two things combined of Stanford's struggling passing defense and Notre Dame's improving passing offense, I think is a good recipe for Notre Dame and one that you'd like to see the Irish take advantage of. So if they don't, I think that is a bad sign, maybe even a very bad sign, unless it's just a game where you feel like you don't need it. And so you don't struggle, but you just don't do a lot with the passing offense. But the opportunity should be there for Notre Dame to take advantage of the Stanford secondary. Brian Habermill asked another question about the passing game. With all the single safety defense Notre Dame has seen and is likely to see with Riley Leonard, did you like the vertical seam Greathouse caught for a touchdown in the Louisville game?
I have not counted the snaps of single safety defense Notre Dame has seen. So, Brian, you're way ahead of me, and I'm going to trust you on that. But, yeah, I love a lot of what Greathouse and Leonard did, and I felt like at the beginning of the year that would be a combination that clicked, and I think we're starting to see that. I think we're going to see that, especially in certain teams where Greathouse matches up well with the nickel from the other team, where he can kind of muscle him and so forth. So yeah, I do like I did like the play that you referenced.
Yeah, and I'm trying to visualize the play in my head. I think there was a route inside of Greathouse that drew the attention of the safety that prevented the safety from making a play on Greathouse's route. And I thought it was a well-designed play, well-read play by Riley Leonard, and a good ball to get it to the open man. And sometimes that hasn't happened this season. And so you like to see Riley Leonard recognizing that opportunity and taking advantage of it. And I think you see on if you watch the replay, Riley Leonard sort of points to the sideline. It looks like he said good call. And I think he mentioned specifically after the game some of the good calls that Mike Denbrock made in the sort of game clinching touchdown drive at the end. And I think the cohesion between Riley Leonard and Mike Denbrock seems to be improving with the more time they spend together.
And Brian, I want to compliment you on your question. I wasn't making fun of you. So if Tyler calls in sick, I'm calling you to do the show with me.
Jeff Stevens says, a coincidence that Cam Hart, Ben Morrison, and Christian Gray all had shoulder injuries.
Oh gosh. Tyler, why don't you take that one?
Well, I think I would start by pointing out that there aren't a lot of, probably the top 3 body parts that get injured in football are knees, ankles, and shoulders. So starting point there, you're going to see a lot of correlation. I was just pulling up the availability update that lists all the different injuries. Right now, Notre Dame has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different players out for the season with shoulder injuries. So that's just a common injury to football. Now, maybe you would say, well, why does and I know some people will say, why does Notre Dame have so many? I don't have a database to compare that to across the country. But certainly at defensive back, and I should mention, those guys aren't all defensive backs to have those injuries. There's a couple of linemen, a couple of defensive backs. So there's a few different positions that get extra strain on their shoulder. Defensive backs do a lot of diving around and extending and tackling with their shoulder. So I think that's just a body part that is maybe more exposed for a defensive back. I think it's more coincidence than correlation that those guys all have had shoulder issues.
One thing I'll just kind of add while we're in this injury conversation, I did ask Marcus Freeman off the top today in the press conference, because I get the question from you guys a lot here and on my chats and stuff, and about, is there a correlation between the strength and conditioning program and the injuries? And, I think the fact that they've taken 3 starters, it's been a short period of time, and 2 of them are at the same position, I think it shows up more. Marcus Freeman on August 26th came to the press conference, so this is 5 days ahead of Texas A&M, and said, hey, I've got receipts. I've researched the last 15 years, and this is the healthiest we've ever been in training camp. And only 3 of those season-ending injuries, and I say only, but 3 of those season-ending injuries happened since he made that declaration. If you look on the list, there are 12 players that are out for the season, but some of those happened in the summer. Jabron Payne happened in the spring game. And Chance Tucker was a scrimmage about maybe 9 days before that press conference. So, Marcus, he wasn't defensive in the question.
No.
He definitely lauded the strength and conditioning staff, the performance staff, as he called it. But he also said, you know what? It's conversations we have. It's things we need to talk about, things we do talk about. So they're not just striking injuries up to coincidence. They are thinking about these things and talking about them without attaching a correlation when there isn't the data there. But they aren't just dismissing it, saying, oh, that's just, fans talking. They are asking themselves the same questions.
Yeah, and I think especially given how Notre Dame is handling injuries now with availability report, if you just look at it on paper, it's like, wow, that's a lot of guys. And that includes a handful of walk-on guys that you would have never known were out for the season in previous years. I would like to do some research on number of season-ending injuries that Notre Dame has suffered in the past. That's probably a tough ask.
Well, during Sean Crawford's era, he would tilt the scale every year.
Yeah, so
he's the new Kevin, or he is the old Kevin Bauman. Kevin Bauman did that too a bunch of times. And my heart goes out to those guys because they came back and became contributors after those injuries. Go ahead, Tyler. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Jeff Stevens asked, I got the impression Kaiser will be back at 100%.
You got the right impression because he is not on the list. I mean, he's not even probable where there's some kind of worry about whether he'll be available or not. So Kaiser was not on that list. His name didn't come up at all. And like some of the others did. Even Sam Pendleton wasn't on the list, but Marcus went and talked about the fact that he got a concussion near the end of that game and that he has been cleared. So they seem to feel very good about Kaiser by omitting him from all those things.
Yeah, though we have seen guys not play when not listed as, or when listed as available. So I think that is worth mentioning. Sorry, it was getting dark over here. Like I was at Eric, so I was been trying to fix.
I had somebody email me about that. This guy thought this was my bedroom. I thought, who has a bedroom this big that is in my business?
So the key is you got to have backlighting, Eric, or I guess it's front lighting. I don't know how the right way to say it.
Well, and he also said something about my lamp being old. That my grandkids bought me that lamp for Christmas 2 years ago. Come on now.
There was the one. I don't know if it's the same lamp or not. I don't have your video big enough on my screen, but you had to.
The one with the tilted.
Yeah, the crooked lampshade. Yeah.
Yeah, I said I need a new lamp. They said, "Okay, Grandpa, we'll get you a new lamp." And then they had the SpongeBob SquarePants spatula back with the awards back there.
And I've been to Eric's house. It is plenty well lit. So he is paying his electric.
And I'm lit tonight.
All right. Let's see. What else do we have here? Frank Sarah, while we're on the injury topic, asked, Freeman mentioned that Stanford had injuries. Do you know what Stanford players are hurt?
We usually kind of dig into that about midweek. Tyler does a really good job of dissecting everything that's going on with the opponent. Monday is a really busy day for us, so we're not looking at. I know Ashton Daniels, who had been their starting quarterback, didn't play against in their loss to Virginia Tech. And I did look at the story Saturday night when I was doing my top 25. I like to do a lot of research, even teams outside the top 25. And they made it sound like Lamson playing was more of a choice, but I'm not so sure Ashton Daniels. I mean, he was their leading rusher. I'm really surprised if he didn't play and there was no injury involved, but we will get you an injury report midweek. And Tyler, I'm holding you to that on your opponent outlook.
Yeah, I'm pulling up the post-game story from our rivals Stanford side, which I will Ben Parker is the publisher over there. I'll have an opponent outlook story with him later in the week. So I don't have a full rundown of the injuries on a Monday.
The quarterback would be big because I think Daniels is decent. And
he did say Daniels was injured in his story. It says
the AP story was like, they made a change.
Yeah, it says Daniels was available for the game but didn't get much practice over the week as he is getting over a foot/ankle injury. So it said it'll be interesting to see when he returns. So he was available to go, but didn't practice much. And
I think they're a different team with him running the offense.
And then Micah Ford, I'm not even sure who that is. Is listed as someone that was injured and limped off the field, so they don't know what the status of his injury is. I would have to look up that. But we'll have plenty more of that information throughout the week, Frank. Monday is just not the best time. We're trying to wrap our hands around all the Notre Dame stuff on Monday, but we'll keep folks in the loop on
Appreciate the question, Frank.
Yeah, and on InsideNDSports.com. All right, we got plenty more questions here to choose from. I'm trying to hold off on.
I sound like a get off my lawn kind of guy sometimes when these guys ask the questions. I don't mean to come off that way. Only Tyler has to stay off my lawn.
Yeah, Eric has asked me many times to stay off his lawn. I'm like, I'm just trying to park, Eric. Leave me alone. All right, another question from Scott Fegan. Guys, we talk a lot about the players making strides after the week off. Can you identify areas that the coaches needed to improve on going forward?
So for me, just off the top of my head, improve on, because I think they have some challenges around the injuries, but improve on. I mean, I think Marcus even talked about it in his opening statement today. Notre Dame needs to be a better team against the run.
Mm-hmm.
I know that schematically they don't want people throwing the ball over their heads and they want to limit explosive plays. I think you can do both. And I think Notre Dame has given up a lot of rushing yards to teams that are some of the worst running teams in the country, a couple of them. And they're going to face some really good rushing teams, not necessarily this week, especially if Ashton Daniels isn't available, but they've got Army and Navy coming up, and they both can run. They're in the top 5 in running, and they're the number 1 and 2 teams in the country in passing efficiency. So they're also throwing the ball well when they do throw the ball. But I think they need to be better with that. So Al Golden, I think that was probably a point of emphasis for him, given Marcus's opening statement today. I think Coach Bola with the linebacker rotation, I think refining that a little bit more, maybe having a little bit more longer rotations where guys are on the field and can get into a rhythm and a little bit more consistency. And then really paying attention who the pairings are, paying attention to who's playing well. I mean, right now, I think Bowen and Kingston Viliamu-Asa and Osbury are all kind of ascending players.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that Jalen Sneed right now is in that category unless he had a really, really good bye week. I think there's lots of things that you could talk about with Mike Brown and his rotations at wide receiver. And I'm sure everybody has tips for Joe Rudolph, but Marcus Freeman seems to be pretty happy with the way that he's coaching. Mike Golick Jr. also kind of gave him some at least leeway in terms of all the things that he's had to deal with this year and what he's done to this point. We'll have Bob Morton back on the post-game shows in a couple of the October games, so we'll get him to weigh in on that as well.
Yeah, I think you nailed a lot of the things there. The offensive line play, more consistency there, and what's it look like with Billy Stroud back. So that's something that Joe Rudolph needs to nail down. The rhythm within the offense with Riley Leonard and Mike Denbrock, I think is important. And one of the things that Marcus Freeman said is they have to get better at penalties. So some of that's coaching, some of that's the players have to do what they're coached in order to make strides there. But I think there's plenty of room for improvement along the coaching and player ranks. We have some opponent related questions. So I'm going to hold those off before we get into a couple more topics here from Freeman's press conference. He said, he being Marcus Freeman, said that he's confident in Jadarian Price after his fumble against Louisville. How big of a role should we expect from Price moving forward?
I mean, I think if he got things right in practice, I think we'll see him right back in the mix with Jeremiah Love, where he's the number 2 option. He's still listed as 1B. I don't know that that's ever been accurate this year, but I think if Jadarian can get to the point where, I think Tim O'Malley said it really well the other day, feast or famine, he'll have like a 24-yard run and then -1. I think if he can moderate those -1s and turn those into 4-yard runs, I think we'll see more of Jadarian Price. I'm really high on him. And again, as long as he's performed well in practice, which it sounded like from Marcus Freeman today that he has during the bye week, that he's going to be right back to where he was. I did notice the OR is gone from after Aeneas Williams' name, so he's definitely the number 3 guy now.
Yeah, and that I know we had been talking about that sort of on a weekly basis about his expanded role and wanting to see him more, just because he felt like a more dangerous player for the defense than someone like Devin Ford. So it's nice to see that Aeneas Williams continues to get time there. Yeah, I think Price's role should look similar to what it's been. I do think, like you mentioned, he has more to work on and improve than just the fumble issue. But I wouldn't be too worried about it being a big concern. Notre Dame's running backs have traditionally done pretty decent at holding on to the football under Dylan McCullough. And obviously with the way that was handled, you see sort of how seriously it's treated within the running back room, even going back to last season when Audric Estime was sat down for fumbling as well. So there are consequences to fumbling at the running back position that maybe there aren't always at some of the other positions. All right. Freeman also shared a conversation that he had with Nickelback Jordan Clark about his unsportsmanlike conduct penalty against Louisville. What did you like about the message that Freeman shared?
Yeah, I went back and looked at the play. The whole game is up on YouTube if you want to rewatch it and don't want to subscribe to Peacock to look at it. And when you watch the play, it was a running play. Jordan Clark was way down the field with Chris Bell from Louisville, and basically after the play headbutts him with his helmet. And yeah, he could have been tossed for that. And then after the game, I think both Jordan and his father got on social media and said, hey, this kid spit in his face and he needed to defend himself. And then Marcus today, the follow-up was that Jordan does regret doing it. And that's sometimes not just in football, in life, people are going to challenge your manhood, and you need to put team glory first in football, and you need to think about the circumstances. And sometimes you have to kind of take it at the time. And that's kind of what Jordan Clark has come to. He's been, other than that penalty, he's been tremendous for Notre Dame. He's been an unbelievable pickup from the transfer portal. He's one of Notre Dame's highest rated players on Pro Football Focus for the year. If you don't follow Pro Football Focus, the eye test would tell you that. And I'll tell you what, he came up big in that game, switching to outside corner when the injuries happened with Ben Morrison, him playing some outside corner with very little prep and doing a really good job against some good receivers.
Yeah, I think Marcus Freeman continues to nail sort of the lessons that you have to sort of relate to college football players. And I think that was another great example of that. To me, I understand where Jordan Clark's coming from about feeling disrespected, and a lot of times you sort of react without thinking about it. It's sort of a reaction more than a thought. But what's great about the game of football is that you're probably going to have a chance to get him back within the means of the rules in a physical way. And so that's if you want to get your revenge, there probably would have been a better opportunity for Jordan Clark to do that than after the play and sort of launching at him with his head. But certainly sometimes you get caught up in the emotions of a situation like that. So,
well, if he gets tossed, that's disastrous at that point, given the numbers. And then that would have been a 2nd and 9 play, and Louisville was pinned pretty deep in their own territory too. Yeah. So that could have been a 3 and out.
Yep. All right, let's get into some of these questions. Smoke and Scott, with the issues on the defensive end position, would we be better off running a 3-4-4 or a 3-2-5?
I don't think that you want to make that change at this point of the year and change your whole scheme and change how your players are, doing their jobs at this point without having a whole bunch of spring practices to do that. And I think Notre Dame has enough players to be able to stay in there 4-3 or 4-2-5, whatever they happen to be. I think all your packages are built off that. I think Notre Dame can play some 3 down when they want to, but I don't think there's a lot of teams they want to do that against. I think it's a good question. I just don't think there's an answer that's going to make you excited.
Yeah, I don't know how feasible that would be at the NFL level, let alone the college level. I think that would be a tough ask, especially if you're asking coaches to coach things that they haven't really prepared for, and then you're putting players in positions that they haven't prepared for. I think there are certainly wrinkles, and we'll see different looks against a Navy and an Army, I'm sure. And sometimes on a weekly basis, you can add some wrinkles in there, but I don't think that Notre Dame's going to vastly change the scheme of its defense based on the injuries at the Viper position. I think it would have to get much more dire for Notre Dame to consider that.
And I'm going to give Smoke and Scott credit because Scott probably realizes Al Golden was an old 34 guy way back in the day.
Yeah, I think he could do that. But Marcus Freeman's big thing is you got to play fast, and it's hard to get guys to play fast when you're
absolutely
you're learning a new scheme in the middle of the season. All right, wanted to get into some of the college football mania that happened this past weekend, and we have some questions from a pair of Jeffs, Riddle and Stevens. Let's go with Jeff Riddle because Jeff Stevens has had a few other questions already. Hot take from Jeff Riddle: SEC and Big Ten will get a total of 8 teams in the 12-team playoff, 1 group of 5, plus 1 ACC and 1 Big 12. So only 1 spot left for Notre Dame. How far up could the Irish be seated at 11-1?
Okay, so take about 8 out of the 12 to SEC and the Big Ten. I'm not sure it's going to play out that way. It could, I guess. I think one of the things that hurts the SEC and the Big Ten both is some of the parity. I mean, when Vanderbilt beats Alabama and Arkansas beats, you have unranked teams, then there's still Alabama and Tennessee still have to play. LSU still has to play tough teams. So, instead of having maybe 9-3 record, a team would be 8-4, which is a lot harder sell into the 12-team playoff, especially if one of your losses is to an unranked team. But I'll answer the second part of the question. How far up could Notre Dame be seated at 11-1? I still think they could get to 5. I'm not predicting that. I think home playoff game, if they go 11-1, is probably more likely than not. And a lot of it, to me, depends on Texas A&M. The better Texas A&M is, the better that makes Notre Dame look, because as you look at the rest of the schedule, I mean, Navy could, if Notre Dame beats Navy, Navy's only loss might be to Notre Dame. I was looking at the rest of their schedule. Mm-hmm. They've already beaten Memphis, beat them by double digits. Army is kind of in the same boat. I think they have a harder road, and I don't think they're as good as Navy. Virginia right now is 4-1. I think the bottom will fall out of that fairly soon, but they're much better. I think Tyler, I'll give him credit, in the early season thought Virginia might be a tougher game than was projected, and I think Virginia was picked 16th or 15th in the ACC. And
you always knew where they were ranked in the preseason rankings.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have to pay attention to that.
Yeah,
stuff.
No, I know. I don't blame you for knowing that, but I usually don't have an idea.
So, so the schedule shapes up different. USC losing to Minnesota is kind of a big deal because USC, I think, plays Penn State here coming up this week, and they've still got more tough games ahead of them. So I think Texas A&M is probably the best selling point for Notre Dame if they keep winning. And they've got a couple of more tough games left. They have LSU and they have Texas. Both those games are at home, but those are their 2 toughest games left.
Yeah, and Louisville could certainly look like a better win if it can roll off some wins. You wonder, how much of the loss to SMU was sort of a letdown from the Notre Dame game, that they put so much into that game. And
SMU is a decent team, I think. I ranked them this week.
But LSU does have Louisville does have some tough games left, and so they could end up with 4 losses, and it wouldn't be a shock. But they could also run the table the rest of the season, and I don't know that would be a shock either. So I think it would help Notre Dame for if that does occur. But yeah, I think A&M's where a lot of your eggs are laying right now, and rooting for Mike Elko to finish the season strong, to have that sort of one big resume win to sort of counterbalance the big resume.
Right, because the higher A&M finishes in the SEC standings, it gives you a comparison point for Notre Dame and those SEC teams with 3 and 4 losses.
Right. All right. I think we had another one from Jeff Stevens. Win or lose, what ND opponent surprised you most last week? It was crazy among the top 25.
I'm trying to think of their opponents. Who surprised me the most? Tyler, you go first while I'm trying to think of it. I'm trying to go through.
I mean,
Texas A&M.
Right, yeah, that's
beating
what I was
Missouri like them. I mean, they just crushed Missouri.
Yeah. Yeah, if you would have said, will Texas A&M win, I wouldn't have been shocked. But to beat them like that, I was like, wow, what is that the same Texas A&M team we saw in College Station a month ago? So that was an impressive win. That was probably the most shocking.
I think shocking bad USC to Minnesota.
Yeah,
I watched part of that game.
I wouldn't have expected USC to lose that game. I was not expecting Louisville to lose to SMU, but it's not. I don't think it's that shocking.
SMU's quarterback is really good.
Yeah, and Louisville was in that game and had a chance to win in the second half, but wasn't able to pull it out. So they got some things to fix over there at Louisville. All right, Brian Habermill says, do you like Max Hurleman catching the punts like Fink/Goodman? Do you think they've adopted the first do no harm, i.e. catch without fumbling approach at punt returner?
I mean, when you talk to Marty Biaggi and Marcus Freeman, the thing they want is no fumbling. I mean, that's above everything else. Catch the punt, don't turn the ball over. But I don't think it's just catch the ball and be happy about it. And actually, when I was talking to Marty Biaggi about this a couple of weeks ago, I said, I see a little Zibby in Hurleman, and he liked that reference. And then Hurleman was back there toward the end of the Louisville game and was catching the ball and running with it. So he's not listed as the punt returner this week. It's Faison or Greathouse is listed. So I don't know if Max is going to be in that mix this week, but I like him. I think he's fun to watch. I think he can be sure-handed with it. He's done it a lot in his career, and I think he's not afraid to run with it when he's, in traffic and catch it in traffic.
Yeah, I don't know that I would lump those three guys together. Goodman was a fair catch guy. I think Fink would return punts. He might not have been the
best.
There's
a statue of Goodman going like this.
Fair catch, Goodman. It's in one of the tunnels of the stadium. You just got to find it. So yeah, I mean, I think Max Hurleman seems kind of fearless back there. So if he were asked to continue to play back there, I don't know that he's just going to stand back there to fair catch and make sure that you get possession. I think he'd be looking to make a play. And obviously, when the game's tighter, he's got to be more careful with that than some of the situations he's been in previously. Mike DeVoy says, given the thinness in the defensive backfield, should they consider moving Devin Ford back to safety now that the two freshmen have more experience at running back?
I don't know that they need the help at safety. I think they need the help at corner. And I talked about this, I think, a little bit on last week's show. We kicked around the idea, should Rod Hurd II cross-train at corner and safety, and then advance Luke Talich and Kennedy Urlacher and guys like that seem more ready. I think that would be the direction I would go rather than putting Devin Ford. I think you wouldn't get much from Devin Ford, especially missing this much of the season and missing training camp. I think he would be not helpful at all. I think there's other young safeties that would be playing ahead of him, including Tate Johnson if he ever enters the lineup, which will probably be in November.
Yeah, I think it would only be like if you have a couple more injuries. I don't know that. And now maybe there's something you can do proactively and give him a little bit of time at safety, whether it's like on the scout team or something. But I don't know that that's something that is of an immediate need for Notre Dame. Scott Fegan asks, who will be the toughest game left on the schedule? Navy, USC, Georgia Tech, other?
Tyler, you had a question that was similar about October. I still think USC probably is of the ones. Okay, so we have the pick of any remaining game.
Yeah.
I think he's Scott just giving me some clues.
Yeah, Scott.
Okay. Thanks, Scott. Okay.
Multiple choice.
You mean I don't get to pick Florida State? I'm probably going to say USC will gather themselves together. What will be on the line for that game and having to go out to Los Angeles? It probably is, but I think Navy is really challenging. If they had a defense, let me look at their defensive numbers. If they had a defense, that game would be really scary. They are really, they're number one in red zone offense. They're fourth in turnovers lost, third in rushing offense, 2 in pass efficiency, 7th in sacks allowed. But you look, they're 96th in total defense. I think if they were a more average Navy team and they don't stop the run very well, I would be more concerned about that game. And I think it might be the second toughest game. And they're going to be a change-up. There's not a lot of the games that you've played to this point that are going to help you prepare for Navy, especially with Georgia Tech. If they had Paul Johnson still coaching there, yeah, it would have been the perfect doubleheader. He played 2 of those teams in a row. But Georgia Tech is a conventional offense now with a really good quarterback.
Yeah, I think I would still go with USC, but that could change in a few weeks. Like one more loss and things could start to even spiral worse for USC. And then there aren't really stakes for that game other than obviously playing against your rival.
I like Riley Leonard said, we're 2 plays away from being undefeated. Really?
Oh, Lincoln Riley. You said Riley Leonard. I was.
Lincoln Riley. Riley Leonard would say, golly, we're 2 plays away.
So I think I would still go with USC. I do think that Georgia Tech game could be a tough one. Playing in Atlanta, I think it. I don't really know what to expect from that crowd. There's probably going to be a decent.
They're going to be happy because the Chick-fil-A stands will be open because it's not Sunday.
Yeah, I think there'll probably be a decent Notre Dame contingent in there, but maybe that environment gets raucous if that game.
Marie from Atlanta will be there.
It is close early, so Navy is a tough one. I think that's certainly a game you can't overlook, but I'm not really ready to put that at the top of the list. Although I would put it at the question that you were referencing, Eric. I asked us to rank Notre Dame's 3 October games in order of difficulty to win. I do think that Navy one is probably the most difficult in October, with Georgia Tech sort of right behind it, and then Stanford. What do you think about those 3?
That was what was on my paper.
All right. I didn't cheat, I promise. All right. Before we get out of here, I want to get in some recruiting talk. So yeah, Chris, we'll hit that for you. Jeff submitted a couple questions as well. Let's start with Daniel Anderson, because Jeff asked about him. Notre Dame lost the commitment of running back Daniel Anderson out of Arkansas, a 3-star running back. This was a mutual decision and something that Notre Dame was okay with and wasn't necessarily fighting to keep him in the class. Anderson had an injury last season and is sort of – I just don't think he's followed the development curve that Notre Dame thought he would from having such production as a sophomore. He's sort of like in a 3-way committee at his school in Arkansas, and it doesn't help that his school blows out their opponents so badly. So he can go into a game and leave with 3 or 4 carries, and sometimes that's in the first quarter, and then the game's out of hand, and they're not playing much after that. So I don't know if Notre Dame is going to take another running back. They're certainly weighing the options there. I don't know that they're going to reach for someone like. To me, it's not going to be a priority in the way that quarterback is a priority now that Deuce Knight is not in the class. some of what I've heard that is that Notre Dame is trying to figure out what the scholarship math looks like and will the settlement go through, and that you are dealing with 105 as a roster limit next year as opposed to 85. There's still sort of some uncertainty there in terms of how that's all going to work out. So you can't overfill your class too much, but I do think Notre Dame wants to be aggressive. So if it can find a running back that it really likes to add to the class, I think it will do that, but I don't know that there's obvious answers right now at that position. And then obviously everyone knows if you're a Notre Dame fan that Deuce Knight finally flipped to Auburn last week. I was actually out of the house for like 30 minutes, and that's when it happened. Fortunately, I'd had a story written since early September, so we could have that ready to go. It might have even been late August for all I know. But so turn that around, and the question is that everyone wants to know is, where does Notre Dame go from here? I think there's some potential guys that make sense that Notre Dame may be looking at, but I don't know that there's obvious answers. And I do feel strongly that Notre Dame is going to try to keep what they're doing under wraps as much as possible. And I don't know that there will be a lot to publicly report unless quarterbacks start talking about it until it gets close to one of those guys gets up for a visit. Given the way Notre Dame's schedule works out, I think you'd like for Notre Dame to have someone on campus this weekend, because you don't get a chance to get them on campus for a game weekend until November then, just with the way the schedule works out. So Notre Dame's sort of in a bad spot there in terms of hosting guys on visits with the way the timing worked out. But Notre Dame has dealt with situations like this before in losing and trying to flip someone in the middle of a senior season. So we'll see where they go from here. Pretty much anyone of quality at the quarterback position is committed somewhere. So it will be someone that is committed elsewhere. And that's part of the reason why that Notre Dame is trying to keep things under wraps, because you don't want to get as much pushback from a team that already has them committed in, and them sort of lining up all their resources to try to get those that quarterback to stay in their class. So we'll see what happens there. What are your thoughts on this situation at quarterback for Notre Dame, Eric?
I think, again, I wrote a story for Saturday about how people maybe overreact to decommitments. I think Deuce Knight is going to be a special player, but I mean, you look at the 18 that have decommitted from Notre Dame that are still playing college football, and there's not a lot of them that are doing well. Now, I think some of them will, and we've seen signs of it. Dylan Edwards, who's already switched schools once, is a guy that comes to mind. Elijah Page is starting for USC, although he's had some troubles being their starting left tackle. I'm not sure that he's having a better year than Anthony Knapp. But I think Notre Dame will find a good quarterback to flip. Am I allowed to mention a name?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so Adam Gorney has been mentioning Bryce Baker, who's committed to North Carolina, and if there's a coaching change there, I think that's kind of an intriguing name. I mean, he's a top 100 type guy, 6'2", dual threat kind of player. I think that one's kind of interesting, but I think there's others. I'm not saying focus in on that one, but I think that would be an interesting guy. I think Notre Dame will get interest. The other thing is, I mean, if Noah Grubbs isn't, a surefire thing either. I mean, he's certainly presenting himself as that right now, but let's say that he does end up signing with Notre Dame way in 2026. You have CJ Carr, right now you have Kenny Minchie and Steve Angeli too. There's times this has happened in Notre Dame and there haven't been these quarterbacks in the other classes around him. This time there are really good quarterbacks. I'm not sure that Deuce Knight will have a better career than CJ Carr, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I would add on look what happened to these guys who decommitted to Notre Dame when they went elsewhere. I think that doesn't necessarily we don't know what would have happened if they came to Notre Dame. Like if Notre Dame was the right spot for them, would have been able for them to maximize their abilities. That doesn't so if Keon Keeley came to Notre Dame, would his career be the same as it has been at Alabama? My guess would be no. But you don't know. And that's the world of recruiting. You got to try to hope and predict and make decisions that you believe in terms of taking chances.
But can you imagine if he had come to Notre Dame and he had played in one game in 2 years and it wasn't because of injury?
Well, his name's Brendan Vernon. Yeah, I can. Or Tyson Ford. That Notre Dame is doing it now. Obviously, Keon Keeley was higher ranked than those guys even, but that stuff does happen.
But we get questions about those guys all the time, or we did get questions about Tyson Ford.
Yeah, of course.
People remember the recruiting ranking and they wonder, well, why isn't so and so not playing?
Yeah, no, that definitely happens. Mike DeVoy threw in a question here. Is 105 going to be a hard cap, i.e. no walk-on players, no players having their academic expenses paid with NIL, etc.?
They're moving in that direction. I don't know that that's a hard and fast thing. I know that coaches have expressed wanting to somehow have the walk-on programs, but they're talking about 105 being the roster ceiling. So teams would have the option to fund all 105 or less than that. I think you would think that a Notre Dame program would fund all 105. So we're getting closer to it. There was a preliminary approval of the settlement. I don't want to get too much into the court stuff because it's boring to me. I'm going to fall asleep even with this cup of coffee. But the first step in moving toward this happened today. The next step will be April 7th. That'll be the final ruling on this. And then they'll really have to put all this in practice and so forth. But I think we're headed that way right now, Mike.
Yeah, and I don't know that anyone knows for sure like what exactly it's going to look like, because I think there could be tweaks between now and the time it actually gets implemented.
Right.
So yeah, it's certainly like if it is that 105 and you can fund those scholarships and you can't really have walk-ons otherwise, like I would imagine that programs like Notre Dame are going to fund 105 scholarships. It's not going to be like the basketball program where I asked Micah Shrewsbury about it last week, and he's like, if it goes to 15, I'm not sure that we can keep 15 guys happy, and I don't know that it makes a lot of sense for us to have 15 scholarship players in a lot of situations. And the women's basketball program deals with that too. They're not maxing out the scholarship totals, but it's a different sport. I think
they max out the injury totals
at the high end with college football. I think if you don't, I think it might even be used as a recruiting tool against you. So I think I would be surprised if that is the possibility that Notre Dame didn't do that. Lastly, on the recruiting front, Notre Dame did get a commitment after all last week. Wide receiver Antavius Richardson early in the week was flipped from South Florida. Someone has played mostly quarterback and defensive back at his high school, Greenville, in Georgia. But Notre Dame likes his speed. He's a talented athlete, and it was someone that the Irish were fighting with Alabama for. And he visited Alabama after making his official visit to Notre Dame, and he decided that he was ready to make his decision and committed to the Irish. So he had seen both programs and felt most comfortable with what Notre Dame was putting in front of him, and I think he's an interesting option for Notre Dame at the receiver position. Certainly an interesting group of wide receivers in this Notre Dame class. Not exactly the big time names that you would have liked to have added, or the ones that you were talking about at the beginning of the recruiting cycle. But Notre Dame's piecing together a class here and hoping to get one more wide receiver with a short list of options there moving forward.
He plays in a small enrollment class in Georgia, but he won the 100, 200, and 400 meter state championship last spring.
All right. Well, I think that's going to be it, Eric. Anything else you want to highlight before we get out of here?
I want to highlight you guys putting up with me today with my bumbling through my intro and all the great questions and comments. And thanks for watching us. And we have lots of content coming this week, including our post-game takeaway show in the middle of the night in my living room next this Saturday.
Yeah, we'll have an Inside ND Sports podcast between now and then. Place your bets on Friday.
I'm going to make Tyler work in the dark.
So make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel for all that. Thanks to everyone for chiming in. We want to hear from you in the comments, even if you're watching on replay too. So please let us know what you thought about our conversation. And thanks to MyBookie for sponsoring the show tonight. And then lastly, if you're interested in a subscription to InsideNDSports.com, please take us up on our 30-day free trial with the promo code NDYT. Get you access to all the things that we're reporting behind the scenes, and that's given to our subscribers first. So thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Have a great week, and good luck with all your endeavors.